little bit about Jamboree. So Jamboree started in 1993, and we are in this space where we train students for GMAT, GRE, SAT, TOEFL, IELTS, and help with applications, help with admissions to universities that accept these exams. So we do just a handful of things. We have been focusing only on these things, and so you can think of us as specialists. We don't do 50 things, we do only this handful, like 5 6 things, and we do them well. One data point that we are extremely proud of is that around 25% of our students every year, they end up getting 700 or more on the GMAT. So and we teach close to 15 to 20,000 students, so maintaining that kind of average, across that kind of data point of across 15 to 20,000 students every year is a milestone. That is something we target every year, and we have been able to do this, since all these years. So the way we teach GMAT is very very scientific. We don't make students learn grammar rules or no anything that they have to learn extra. We don't do that. We teach them just shortcuts and methodologies that are easy to understand. We don't teach grammar jargon. Even without learning the grammar jargon, if you follow our method, you should be able to get a good score, right? Most of our students are engineers, so our method is very scientific and designed to teach non-native English speakers like Indian students. So if those of you who are not Jamboree students, if you would like a free demo class for GMAT or GRE, so you can leave your number in the chat. Our team would reach out to you and schedule your demo session. So in this session, this can be either math or verbal. It's your choice. And based on what kind of class you want, you can get a sneak peek into our methodology, be it math or be it verbal. So I see quite a few of you typing. So I will just I'll pause to let you finish the typing. Those of you who had already left your numbers in the previous webinars, you don't have to do that again. If there's anybody who has left your phone numbers, in yesterday's webinars or day before webinar, then you don't have to type it out again. But those of you who are attending for the first time today, so it's mainly for you. If you are interested in a free demo class or a free profile evaluation session where we can go through your CV and discuss college options with you, discuss what are the gaps in your profile and what can be done to fill those gaps. So all these things, one-on-one customized profile evaluation sessions, if you're interested in, again, you can leave your number and our team will schedule a session with you. And this will be free. You don't have to pay anything for that. So very quickly, some of you are attending this webinar for the first time. So very quickly, let me go through the admissions criteria. What are the different things that you have to work on if you want to get admission in a good business school? It can be for an MBA program or it can be for an MIM program, but any business school that accept GMAT scores, GMAT or GRE. Nowadays, a lot of the business schools also accept GRE for a lot of their programs. So you have to check out if the business schools that you have in mind, if they accept GRE also, then you can take GRE also, right? So you would need a standardized exam score, a GMAT or GRE score. And depending on which country you are targeting, now you would also need a language test, either a TOEFL or a IELTS. But if you are applying to, let's say, Asian business schools or Indian business schools, then you will not need the language test, right? So the language test requirement is a factor of which country you are targeting, which country you are applying to. You would also need the university would also look at your academic record, not your 10th and 12th marks, but your bachelor's degree for sure, and anything else that you may have done, your master's degree, any kind of professional certifications, everything would fall under the academic record category. Universities look at standardized test score, the GMAT GRE score and the academic record as a single component. Both of these put together, they give an indication to the university about whether you will be able to cope with the curriculum or not. So this is good news. If you feel that your academic record is not that good, then you can compensate for it with a high GMAT or GRE score, right? And anyway, your GMAT, GRE score would be the more recent thing. Your academics probably are in the past, right? So your most recent thing that you would be submitting to the university would be your GMAT or GRE score. So having a high GMAT or GRE score definitely helps, especially if your academic record is not as good as you would have wanted it to be, right? Then the next parameter is your work experience or internships. So internships mainly is for MIM students, students who are applying for masters in management kind of programs. For people with MBA, people applying for MBA, your combination of work experience and internships. So if your work experience is more than 2 years, then definitely only work experience, right? So and while talking about work experience, it's not just the number of years of work experience, the quality of work experience matters more, right? What kind of profile have you held? How have you grown in your career? Do you have any international exposure? Do you have any exposure to leadership roles, etc., etc., right? So work experience is assessed not just in terms of the number of years, but more qualitatively, right? Extracurricular activities, so this is very important, and this is usually a weak point when it comes to Indian applicants. So most Indian students, they have a lot of extracurricular activities during school and college days, but when they start working, their extracurricular activities they decrease, right? But when you are applying to the universities, you need, I mean, the extracurricular activities profile is an important part, right? So if this is a gap in your profile, then you have to think about how to make up for it, especially if you're targeting the top 50 universities in the world. Now, essays and letters of recommendation, LOR stands for letters of recommendation. So essays and letters of recommendation, they form a part of your online application form, right? And this is where, using these two things, you will be kind of validating, or you will be kind of highlighting the best things in your profile. The essays and LORs are to be used to highlight the best things in your profile, right? So you have to make time, you have to take out enough time to write these documents. They're extremely important. We had done a session on the career goals essay. So the career goals essay happens to be the first document that a lot of the top universities would read, even before looking at your GMAT score. So do invest, enough time while writing your essays. Then uh, almost all the business schools for MBA program would have an interview round. So if they like all these things, if they like all these things about you, they would give you an interview call. These interviews can be can be one on one, through through like Zoom or Skype, etc. It can be a face to face, like a panel interview also. Like a lot of Indian business schools, the IIMs, ISB, they have panel interviews. So there will be like 2 to 3 interviewers and you, so it's a panel interview. Whereas most of the non-Indian business schools, they have one-on-one interviews, so one interviewer interviewing you, so it will not be like 3 people interviewing you, right? So you have to prepare accordingly. The kind of preparation you would need for a panel interview is different for the kind of preparation you would need for a one-on-one interview. Again, lot of the universities abroad, they have alumni interviewer, so that means you will be interviewed by alumni, right? Whereas in most other countries, the interviewer happens to be from the admissions committee. So the kind of preparation you need to do for an alumni interview is not going to be the same as the kind of preparation you would need to face an admissions committee member, right? So the interview is an important part. And very often business schools would give you just about 5 to 6 days notice, so they before the interview. So often that is not enough time to prepare for the interview. So one common mistake that I see students doing is that they start preparing, or they think that I will prepare for the interview once I get the interview call. So that is a very I would not say bad per se, but it's not a very smart strategy. In 5 days, you are not, you may not have that kind of time to prepare for the interview. So your interview preparation, how to interview, how to handle a panel interview, how to handle an admissions committee interview, how to handle an alumni interview. So all these things you have to do while you are applying, right? Don't leave it to till the end. Don't think that I will start the interview training, or I will start preparing for the interview after I get the interview call. So that's not a very smart strategy. So keep that in mind. Okay, so these in short are the admissions requirement. uh, Different universities give different weightages to these parameters. And traditionally the Indian business schools, they give more weightage to your academics and the GMAT scores. But otherwise outside India, all the international business schools, so they look at these things equally. Essays, they give a lot of weightage to the essays, right? Okay, moving on. What are the different funding options? How do students usually fund their MBA program? Let's face it, an MBA or an MIM degree, especially if you want to do it from abroad, it's not gonna come cheap. If you're looking to do it from a top 20, 30 business school, it's not gonna come cheap. So how do you handle, or how do most MBA students, or how do most management students handle their finances? So some of the things that are available: scholarships, assistantships, loans, right? And internships. So these are the four things using which a student can use a combination of these to fund their MBA program. Internship is a not all business programs, not all MBA programs have the internship, right? So internship, if you're going for a 2-year MBA program, then it is going to have a paid internship of 3 to 4 months. So because it's a paid internship, it will take care of your one, at least one semester tuition. But there are the shorter duration MBA programs, you have to check whether they have an internship or not, right? So a lot of the European MBAs are 1-year MBA programs, so they may not have the internship. So do check it out thoroughly. So people who are a little bit under financial crunch, who don't have that kind of money, no, it helps if you do a paid internship. Another advantage of doing an internship is that if you do well during the internship, you may end up getting a job offer from that company, right? So that you will have a job in hand even before your final semester, right? So that's always a big plus. So for international students, especially in the current scenario, it helps if you choose an MBA program which has a paid internship as a part of the program, right? So do be careful about that. uh, so this is what the college will help you set up. They have a career development center, they have the alumni network. So the college helps, the business school helps set up these internships. I mean, they will definitely help you a lot in that. These other three things are the things that you have to plan. You can plan ahead now, from now onwards, right? And let me just elaborate a bit about those. Now, what are the different kind of scholarships available? So one is tuition waivers. We see this a lot. Canadian universities, American universities, even the Asian business schools. So they do give tuition waivers based on the strength of the profile. So if you are applying to a certain business school, and if you are in the top 5 to 20% of the admitted students, so they do want you to join the university. If your profile is very strong, if you are a really good applicant, they will want you to join their class. So to entice you, so they will give you tuition waivers. So we have seen tuition waivers up to 100% also. So your strategy should be that, so in a very high ranked college, like your like Harvard, MIT, all of that, right? It's very difficult for anybody to be in the top 5 to 10% of the admitted class. It's extremely difficult. So if you are willing to compromise on the quality of the business school a little bit, so your chances of falling in the top 5 to 10% of the admitted students, that your chances increase, right? So we had a student a couple of years ago. He had a 780 on his GMAT. His work experience was really good. He had international exposure, so but he was he didn't have enough funds to to basically, he didn't have like the 60-65 lakhs required, right? So he didn't apply to the expensive business schools. He applied to the business schools which for him were safe schools. So he got admission in University of North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill. So UNC Chapel Hill, Keenan Flagler Business School, that's one of the top 20 programs. But for him, he could have gotten into a higher ranked college. But in UNC, he got 100% tuition fee waiver, right? And for him, it was good. And when he graduated, also he completed his MBA last year. So when he graduated, also he was in the top 10% of his class, and he was picked up by, there's this company, finance company called Capital One. So he was picked up by Capital One in, like, he got a job. He's doing really well. Stays in North Carolina, and so basically you have to take some decisions based on where based on where you want to be, right? So if you have a very strong profile, applying to some safe colleges, would your chances of getting a scholarship, your chances of getting tuition waivers would increase. There are some things also called diversity scholarships. So diversity scholarships are not offered by a lot of universities, but when you check out some business schools, you will see that they have something called diversity scholarships. Some of those are for women. Some of them are for women in from having academic, science academic backgrounds. Then there are for minorities. There are for religious minorities, etc., etc. So that if if your ethnicity, or if you fall in whatever the university is giving the diversity scholarship for, if you fall in that category, then you will probably have to write an essay to prove that, to like talk about how why your background has made you a strong candidate, what kind of diverse experience you have had, etc., etc., right? So so this diversity scholarship, it's a very, very university specific thing. So whichever university you have shortlisted, do check that out. Those of you, at least the ladies, females, so a lot of the universities have scholarships, special scholarships for women engineers, women in science, women in business kind of scholarships. So do look out for those. You have to write a separate essay, but no harm taking a shot, right? Then there are these need-based scholarships. This is usually a more an Indian business school phenomenon. Lot of the Indian business schools, if your like annual income of your family is less than 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs, they change the criteria every year. So like until last year for ISB, for instance, if your annual family income is less than 10 lakhs, so you qualify for a need-based scholarship, right? There are also other colleges, Lisbon University. So there are a handful of universities where they have need-based scholarships. You have to write an essay, which is there in the online application form itself. The need-based scholarship essay will be there. So you have to kind of write to the university telling them why you need the money, right? So it is not about, oh, I'm so very intelligent, take me. It's not that. The essay has to answer why you need the money, right? So I'll just give you an example. So one of our students, he had applied to Lisbon Business School in Portugal. So so he had applied for the need based scholarship. So his essay was that he wants to be an entrepreneur, and why he wants to do an MBA is that because he wants to take his business on a global scale. However, he wrote that while he is doing his MBA, his business is going to be on hold. He will be losing out on income if he takes, and because he does not come from a traditionally rich family, he will have to take education loans to do his MBA. Therefore, that will like kind of push back his career goals by a few years. He cannot become an entrepreneur immediately because he has to like pay back those loans. So he wrote this really compelling essay, and he was able to he ended up getting a 90% tuition fee waiver, right? So need based scholarships, wherever need based scholarships are available, right? So it will be a part of the online application form. You have to write an essay telling the university why you need the money. Okay. All right. So I see some questions. So Indian business schools, they give ISB, for instance, they give tuition waivers, limited tuition waivers. They definitely have they definitely have need based scholarships, and diversity scholarship is not there in Indian business schools, right? But abroad, you will see diversity scholarships, and it's not professional diversity. The diversity is usually based on ethnicity or gender. It's not like what kind of unique profession you come from, so that's not considered a diversity. Okay, then comes the assistantships, right? So there's a difference between scholarship and assistantship. In scholarship, the university gives the money, whether it's a tuition waiver or scholarship, the university just gives the money. You don't have to do anything in return, right? On the other hand, an assistantship, you have to do something in return. The university will give you the money, but you have to do something in return. For example, so like a TA is a teaching assistantship. So we see that when we get teachers or lecturers, when they apply for a management program, so some of them end up getting a teaching assistantship. So so the university would give them the money, a stipend kind of thing, and they have to work 20 hours per week for the university. It can be helping a professor prepare his lectures, or any other activity related to teaching, right? So that is a teaching assistantship. Then there's a research assistantship. So anybody who has kind of who has worked in R&D or even market research kind of roles, so we see that sometimes they are given research assistantships. So again, the university would give a stipend, which is usually more than enough to cover tuition as well as cost of living. And but in return, the person has to work 20 hours per week for the university in some research project. We get students who have to help professors with their with their some research work, or who to do some market research or any kind of data analysis, etc., etc. So they get research assistantships. So this is different from the scholarship, in the sense that, for if you get a scholarship, it's just given to you, you don't have to do anything in return. For assistantships, you have to do some tasks, which is fine. Actually, the more interaction you have with faculty, the better it is for you. Most faculty abroad, or even in India for that matter, so they come from industry. They have industry background. So if you have a good rapport with any professor, then you may get introduction to companies, etc. The faculty, the professor might help you get the internships, etc. So TA and RA, if you get, just look at them as opportunities to have build a good rapport with professors. That's all. Now, there's one more thing, just very quickly. Whether you get, now this is mainly for US, right? Whatever I'm saying is mainly for US. So in the US universities, if you look at the tuition fee page, any university you go, so you will see that the tuition fee is categorized under, you will see an outstate fee. I don't know whether you have noticed or not. An outstate fee, which is what an international student pays, and there is something called an in-state fee. Right? In-state fee is for the domestic students. So this is more a case of US universities. Now the in-state fee, if the in-state fee is like X, so the outstate fee is about 4X. And so the outstate fee is so the international students, they have to pay 4 times as much as a domestic student. Now, when a student gets a tuition fee waiver, a scholarship, or a TARA, then it is usually combined with the fact that the student has to pay in-state fee, not the outstate. So, a student who gets a scholarship or an assistantship gets actually, is gets two benefits. He doesn't just get the the money, the stipend, but his fees also reduces. Right? So this is a very important, very it's a lesser known fact about US universities and how the fee works. But you can check it out yourself. Go to any US university program and go to the tuition page. You will see this language in state, outstate. So as international students, outstate fee is what you have to pay. But if you can manage to get a tuition waiver or a scholarship, or an assistantship, you have to pay in state fee also, not the outstate fee. So that is like, double the advantage. So the TARA thing is mostly you get in American and Canadian universities. It's not there for the European universities or Indian universities. So the 1 year MBA programs, there's not much funding available for that matter, because it's just 1 year. You don't, I mean, you can barely finish your own MBA. You know how you're not expected to have enough time to do any kind of research or teaching assignment, etc., etc. The next thing is, of course, loans, right? So there are university loans without co-signer. Now this is a big thing, right? Again, this is something, it's prevalent, in US universities and Indian universities. So if you go to ISB website, you will see that they have a bunch of banks that they are called empaneled banks. So just if you get an admission into an ISB or even an XLRI or any other university in India that takes a GMAT scores, so if you go there, uh, just with your admission letter, based on your admission letter, you will be given the loan. You will not have to show any collateral, or any, you don't need any co-signer, etc., etc. So it's there in the Indian universities, and it is also there in some of the American universities, right? So if you are a US passport holder, then in the US almost all the universities they have this. But if you are an Indian passport holder, then in the US there are about 15-20 universities where international students are given loans without co-signer. So all you have to do is get admission. Based on your admission, on your offer letter, there are, again, they have got financial institutions, they work with financial institutions, and you are given the loan, right? So it's a handful, it's not a huge number, but 15-20 is also good enough. So look out for this. If you are really really dependent on loans, if you are not able to get any scholarship, anything, then choose your universities wisely. Apply to universities where they have this policy, where they give loans to international students without co-signer, right? Now the advantage of these loans is that the rate of interest is very low, about 8 to 10%. So the rates of interest are very low. Then of course, if this is also, if you are not able to like get admission in one of these colleges, then of course the Indian banks is also there, right? From your SBI to HDFC, HSBC, all the Indian banks, they also give the loans. The only catch here is the rate of interest is usually upwards of upwards of 15%, right? So the rate of interest is quite high. SBI is the bank, State Bank. SBI gives loans up to 1.5 crores if you're applying to universities abroad, right? So this is, SBI is always a good option. The next is US banks through intermediaries. So now, uh, so you can take loans from US banks also. Once you are there, after spending a year there, you can take loans from US banks directly. But that's a little tough. That is, you have to be there, stick out for a year. So that may not be a safe option when you're planning your finances. Now, this is a more recent development. Financial institutions such as Prodigy Finance, you may have heard the name Prodigy Finance, Empower Finance, right? So what they do is that, so they act like pretty much like the empaneled banks. You have to get an admission in a good, so they have a list of approved universities, right? So if you get admission in one of those, in one of those approved university lists, then they give you loan, loan, 100% loan. No collateral, no co-signer, right? So this is a more recent phenomenon in India. It has started on the last 3-4 years only. Some of the companies, like Prodigy is the most well-known company. So Prodigy Finance, if you haven't checked it out, you can check it. It's a very it's a very easy way to get a loan, Prodigy Finance. Then there's something called Empower Finance, right? So these are financial institutions which work similar to the university loans without cosigner. So in these also the rates of interest are, in the 8 to 12 range. In most, depending on which country, etc., etc., but they are also lower than the Indian banks. So do explore all these things. Just because loans does not mean that you go directly to the Indian banks. You can start right at the university shortlisting stage. If finance is a big thing for you, if it's a problem area for you, then choose colleges where you can get loans without cosigner. If in the US, if you have any relatives who can be your co-signer, then you get even more university loans. As I said, without co-signer, if there are about 20 universities that you can target, then with co-signer this number becomes about 100, right? So if you have any relatives or anybody in the US, who not just staying there, but who is a PR there, who has a green card there, somebody who can be your co-signer, right? Then you have even more options available. So do check all these out, whether it's financial institutions like Prodigy. Do spend some time in finalizing your planning your finances. Don't just say that I want scholarship, I will go only if there is scholarship available. So that is not a good strategy. The scholarships can never ever be guaranteed. No, so you have to plan your finances accordingly. You have to plan for the worst case scenario and try for the best case scenario. You're planning, when you're choosing a university or when you're planning your finances, you have to assume that you are not going to get any scholarships, right? But of course you will have to try for the best case scenario, in the sense that choose your universities wisely, choose universities which give scholarships to international students, etc., etc. There are universities which do not give scholarships to international students, so do you have to do that research at the university shortlisting stage. So just choosing a business school to fit your budget. Look at scholarships and loan availability. So if there's a business school that you have in mind, then check out their funding your MBA or finance your MBA is a part of the MBA website of that university. So check that out. Look whether they give scholarships to international students or not. And in a loan availability section, don't just look for loan availability. Check whether the loan is available for international students or not. There are lots of loans and financial aid available for their domestic students, but that's not of interest to you. That's not going to help you out, right? So you have to see whether a business school has loan availability or financial assistance availability for international students or not, right? Look at cost of living. It's a very important important point, right? That no it's not the tuition fees. The cost, you have to take care of the cost of living also. And most of the like, for example, if you go to a New York City or Chicago kind of, or an LA business school, Boston business school, so those cities are expensive. It will be like 1,500 to $2,000 per month, kind of expensive. On the other hand, if you go to, let's say, Michigan Ross, or UT Austin, or a Duke, let's say, so these places, or Duke Darden, all these places, so these are good business schools, but not located in very expensive cities. So the cost of living there is like, you can comfortably live in about $1,000 per month, right? So you have to see that also. If finance is a big, is a it's a major thing for you, then you have to plan at such a granular level. Look at where your college is situated, the cost of living of that city. Do check that out. Often students, they only think of tuition, they only look at tuition, but cost of living is a it ranges, it can range from $12,000 per year to $30,000 per year. So that's a massive difference, right? Look at overall cost of the MBA. So yeah, as I was saying, students usually look at the tuition fee. What's the tuition of the business school? But tuition plus cost of living, tuition plus living. So your cost of MBA is tuition plus living, right? So look at this number. Don't just look at tuition. There may be a business school where the tuition is probably high, but it may not be situated in a big city. Therefore, the cost of living would be low, right? So so yes, I mean, look at the overall cost of the MBA, not just the tuition. So that's all I wanted to say, so that's all I want to talk about, right? How, what are the things that you can do, what's the kind of research that you should be doing. So if any of you want, if there is anybody who wants to talk about specifically about your own profile, etc., again, you can leave your number in the chat. We'll be happy to have a one-on-one detailed discussion with you. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. So there's a poll on your screen. Please answer that before you leave. So in case you have no questions, you can leave. Thanks for attending. Yes, Shiva Sood, what's your question? You can unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. So thanks for this informative session. It was really helpful because usually when we start planning for an MBA, before even we start to focus on the GMAT score, there are the other things when it comes to international MBA. So thanks for
Right.
putting light into all these aspects for making MBA seem feasible for most of us. Thanks for that.
You're
So
welcome.
yeah, so my question is that I recently read a news where read some news somewhere wherein they said that Michigan Ross has waived off the GMAT and GRE for some students. So what are exactly the GMAT waivers, and like what are these, like
Not
what are
a
the
waiver per se. So because of the coronavirus thing, so they have become a little flexible. For instance, even in an ISB kind of college, they have extended the deadline by when you can submit your GMAT scores. So a lot of the business schools, they are doing this. Some of them, they are saying that, okay, it's not mandatory for you to submit. But what that means is that, if you have a good GMAT score, they will give preference to that student. It's not, so there are two different languages that one is that the test is optional, or that it's not required. So that means that, it is optional, you can take it or not take it, but the university is not saying that, that it is not an admissions criteria. So students with good GMAT scores will be given preference. Then there is another statement that we have, that our admission policy is test blind. So test blind means that they are not going to look at anybody's GMAT score. So GMAT is not even an admissions criteria, and only a handful of, some, like, business schools, and they are not like in the top 100. They have done this. They are saying that we are not going to look at GMAT scores at all. But unless you see the language test blind, so it means that a business school is saying that you can apply without a GMAT score, but at the same time, if somebody has a good GMAT score, that person will be given preference.
okay? Thank you.
Okay. All the best. Yes, Vishal Patel. Vishal, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
See, actually, the thing is that um, uh, I came to know through other counselors that UK has the highest number of scholarships. So, what are what are my chances of getting a scholarship? Like
Okay.
I'm planning for doing an MIM in international business, and I'm currently a student. I'm doing my bachelor's right now.
UK has one of the least amount of scholarships available for international students. I don't know where you heard that. So there are not many scholarships, available for international students.
In UK.
Yeah. Yep.
So it is.
So,
So
but
this
but
information is
still,
wrong.
yeah, that's whoever has told you, that's not correct.
Okay. And ma'am, one
but
thing
but we would still like to know your profile in detail. So if you have left your number, then our counselor will
ma'am,
call you
I've
and
left in my first session.
okay, has anybody called you yet?
No, ma'am. And
Okay.
ma'am, one thing I want to ask you is that why, see, last time I asked you that why should I pursue an MBA or an MIM? Sorry, Masters or MIM? So you told me MIM. So is there any specific reason why you told me to directly pursue an MIM, not a Masters in International Business?
MIM or must see. You are a student. I'm assuming. So you don't
Yes, ma'am.
have
I
any
am a
work.
student. I'm in second year
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now.
Right. You don't have any work experience. So, see, masters in international business becomes very, unless you are specifically interested in that, it becomes very restrictive. Whereas MIM is like MBA. It's a more open degree. The number of jobs that you would be able to apply to is far more. So that's why I said MIM. MIM is a far broader degree. So you will
Okay.
have far more job opportunities.
And ma'am, also one thing, you told me that, see, you told me like the MIM is like an MBA, but why do you specifically tell me MIM? Because there are some universities which accept me without which will accept me without work experience. But
Even in
why do you?
MIM. Yeah. So, okay, I think I answered that also in the first webinar. That's it. There are universities where you don't even need work experience to go for MBA. But see, if you do an MIM, then the kind of work experience that you would have, it will be really good. And after 3, 4, 5 years, you can apply for an MBA degree, and then you can get into a far better college for your MBA than you would get right now without any work experience. So
Okay.
that's the reason. So if you do an if you MIM now, get some 3, 4 years of work experience, and have the MBA option open for later. Everybody does an MBA, and international MBA is something you are going to do only once in your life, right?
Hmm.
It's not that you do one MBA now, then after 10 years you do another MBA. So nobody does that, at least international MBA, because they're expensive, right? If you
Okay.
do an MBA right now with zero work experience, then it will be extremely difficult for you to get into a top 25, top 30, university. However,
Okay.
if you do an MIM, and MIM for MIM, since work experience is not required, you can, and you if you get good GMAT scores, etc., you can get admission for MIM in a top 10, top 15 college, right? Then
Hmm.
get some really good international work experience, then
Hmm.
apply for an MBA in a top 10, 15 college. So that was the whole, that's the whole
Okay.
logic, you know.
Okay. So there are far more greater chances of getting a good job, securing a good job after an MIM.
No, not necessarily. See, the choice is MIM from a top university, MBA from an average university. Right now, those would be your choices.
Okay.
What would you pick? Would you and I think it makes sense to pick an MIM from a top university, because
Yes,
the
ma'am.
university brand name matters a lot. So
Hmm.
if you have to choose between MIM from a top 15 university or an MBA from a non-top 50 college, so what would you do? You go for the MIM from a
MIM.
top 15 college, right? Yeah. Yep.
MIM. Thank
Yep.
you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yep. All
Really,
right.
thank you.
Okay. Um, Archit, what's your question? Archit, can unmute yourself? Archit, you are on mute. Hello, Archit. Okay, I think your mic is probably not working. Uh, Yashvi Patel. Yashvi Patel, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Hello,
Hi.
ma'am.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, my question is I am the student of the BSc Nursing and I can do MBA. So I have so many options in MBA, but I am interested in doing MBA in hospital and healthcare management. So, which kind of entrance exam I have to clear it?
MBA
Can you
for
answer?
same GMAT. MBA, whether you go for MBA in so you want to go for MHA or you want to go for MBA in in healthcare management.
MBA in hospital and healthcare management.
Yeah, you then GMAT is what you will need to take.
Okay, so I have to clear GMAT.
Yep. It depends on are you a student or do you have work experience?
Actually, I just completed the fourth year BSc nursing now.
So by the time you apply, you will be going for next year, right? 2022.
Yeah, I was thinking that first I will complete my internship 1 year, means in 2021, and then 2022 I'll do MBA. I'll start
Right,
MBA.
right. So yes, I mean, yes, MBA would be, would make sense, because your
Okay.
internship would count as, would count as a work experience. So you'll have
Oh,
one year of
yeah,
work experience. So
yeah. So, can you inform me that which college is best for that? Means MBA in hospital and healthcare management for that.
See, Wharton is the number one program when it comes to, you may have heard University of Pennsylvania's Wharton Business School. So their healthcare management is a number one program. There are a lot of other universities also, like Duke University, Vanderbilt University.
All
Now,
are in India.
they're in the US. You are looking for colleges in India.
I am thinking about India. Yes.
In India, there is see, I mean, ISB MBA is 1 year, and there is no hospital healthcare management in a specialization there. But a lot of doctors do the MBA and they get jobs. Like one of my students, he did the ISB MBA and he got hired in the Fortis hospitals, administration kind of
Okay.
department. So a lot
Mhm.
of doctors they do the ISB MBA in India.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Vedant Kulkarni, what's your question?
Hello, ma'am. First of all, great session from you. Uh, and also, I have two questions actually. So, one is that I'm like on fence about whether I should do MBA from Canada or MBA from the US. So, can you shed some light from your perspective, like the pros and cons of both those countries?
Both of them are good. There's no, there's no actually pros and cons. Both of them are good. My recommendation would be to
Actually, yes,
apply to
also
both countries.
one thing,
Apply
ma'am,
to
also is that I have like a financial, my financial situation is also not very good. So like on that perspective, also can just wanted to give you that the whole clear picture. Okay, you can continue, ma'am. Sorry,
Right.
sorry for
So
like
US
interrupting.
and Canada, when it comes to university scholarships, loan option, everything is equal actually. So my recommendation to you would be to apply to a mix of colleges, apply to some Canadian colleges, apply to some American colleges, then go with the best option. The
Also,
only probably one downside, of Canada is that there are only this 5, 6 good colleges as opposed to US. In US, like there are hundreds of good colleges that you can go for, in good universities that you can go for. In Canada, it's just about five. Rotman, Queens, British Columbia, York, McGill. So just about handful of colleges, right? So that can be one negative, but all of those are good business schools. So you should apply to a mix of US and Canadian business schools and pick the one which is better and which has given you more scholarships, maybe.
yes, ma'am. Also, ma'am, one the other question is that I'm going to be giving my MBA next year around February, March. And right now, I'm just like this is my last year of my BE, okay, my bachelor's, and I'm planning to do a job here to get my work experience of 2 3 years, and afterwards I plan to do the MBA. So like, would uh, there is a thing, right, where you can send your MBA GMAT scores to the colleges for free to the first five colleges, right? So is that still valid after 2 3 years?
Yeah. It'll be your GMAT score has a validity of 5 years. So therefore, the five universities that you choose to send your scores to, so they will keep your scores for 5 years.
Okay, ma'am. And is this, ma'am, a good option that or should I hold on, should I hold out on giving the GMAT? What would be your opinion on this?
My experience is that, what I have seen is that in student life, while you are still a student, you have far more time to prepare for, the GMAT than you will have once you start working. And also in student life, you are in a studying mode. You take, as a part of a college thing, you take 3-hour exams. So you're used to studying, you are used to taking 3-hour exams. Working professionals, they tend to struggle, when it comes to like sitting for 3 hours and taking and concentrating and taking an exam. And especially when your job is new, in the first couple of years of your working, it gets extremely hectic. So if you have an opportunity to take the GMAT exam while you are still a student, then take it. You will probably score higher than what you will score, 2 years later, because you have more time to prepare now. Once you're working, you will not, it will be like, crazy, you'll have to report to work in the
Yes.
morning, come back in the evening. If you end up getting a job in the software industry, it gets worse. As freshers, you would not even get, weekends off sometimes, right? So if you have the opportunity to give your GMAT exam now, give it, keep your score. Future, in a couple of years later, if you think you want to improve your score, then you can take it again. And most probably you will probably end up scoring lower than what you would score now. That has been my observation actually in these years.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your input.
All right, all the best, Vedant. Okay, so this will take two more questions. First, Latika Lodha, what's your question?
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible to you?
Yes, I can hear you, Latika.
Ma'am, the session was very helpful.
Thank you.
I am basically in my last year of bachelor's degree and I plan to apply for a master's in management or global management or something like that. So, could you please suggest a few good master's degrees which I could look for? I was mainly looking for the US or the UK.
So, in Europe, there are a lot of good MSc management programs. Your HEC Paris, London Business School, London School of Economics, Oxford. They all have the MSc in management program, and they are excellent. Great brand names. In the US, Duke University. So in the US, the whole concept of MSc management, MIM. So you will not have too many options. You will actually have far better options in Europe. So so we had covered this in the. Were you not there for the first session?
No, ma'am. I actually got a notification for only for the last two sessions, so I could only join for the last two sessions.
Right. So we did discuss universities, etc. in the first session. So whoever, so are you a Jamboree student?
No, ma'am. I had just started looking out for GMAT and all this a week ago.
Oh, okay, all right. So just keep an eye on our YouTube channel. The recording of the first session should get uploaded there in a week or so. So there I did discuss the different MSc management programs across the world.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
All right. In the meantime, you can check out this HEC Paris, London School of Economics, London Business School, Oxford, Cambridge. They all have very, very, very strong MSc management programs.
Sure, ma'am. I'll do that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so last question, Siddharth Parashar. So if I have not been able to answer your questions, please leave your question in the chat window. Someone from our team will call you and address your query. So Siddharth, here you go. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am.
Siddharth.
Ma'am, I just want to know that whether an internship is important for an MIM or not.
Definitely help. It will help. All right, so I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much. I hope those of you at least who have attended all the webinars in this series, I hope you got enough information to kickstart your preparation for your applications. All the best. Stay in touch. Again, if anybody wants any customized help, you can leave your number in the chat. We'll be happy to reach out to you.